The night had started like any other. My husband, Chike, had been buzzing with excitement all week about his office party. As usual, I stayed back at home, making sure the kids were ready for school the next day and that the house was in order. But tonight would change everything. I had just stepped out of the shower, wrapping myself in a soft towel, when I heard him on the phone. Chike's voice was low, but the words were like a slap to my face. "I'll see you there," he said, with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. I could tell from his tone that he wasn't just talking to anyone. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "See you there," I whispered to myself. Why hadn't he mentioned he'd invited someone? Why had he hidden it? But I didn't ask him. No, I didn't want to make a scene before his big night. Still, the pit in my stomach only grew. The kids were asleep, and it was almost time for me to get dressed. But as I pulled on a simple black dress, something in the pit of my stomach didn't feel right. Chike's office parties weren't anything special, just another gathering of colleagues in the same posh downtown hotel. He would come home tipsy, and we'd have a little argument about how late he stayed out, same old, same old. But tonight I felt it. This night felt different. I tried to shake it off as I pulled out my old makeup kit and gave my face a little more attention than usual. The mirror reflected a version of me that felt a little unsure, but I pushed the thoughts away. By the time I walked into the venue, I had decided whatever Chike had planned, I wasn't going to let it ruin my night. I was going to go in there, act like everything was fine, and then get out. But what I didn't know was that this would be the night I'd confront the truth. A truth I was not ready to face. The lights in the room were bright, and the music was loud, but it didn't drown out the tension that hung in the air. As I walked in, I saw him, surrounded by his colleagues, his hand casually placed on the back of a woman I didn't recognize. She was slim, dressed in a tight, glittery dress that accentuated her curves. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. She was laughing at something Chike said, her hand lightly grazing his arm. It wasn't even the way she looked, but the way he looked at her. His eyes, so full of admiration, like he'd never looked at me that way in years. I froze. My legs felt like lead, and for a moment, I wondered if I was imagining it. Maybe he was just talking to her? Maybe they were friends. But as the seconds passed, I realized this wasn't just a casual conversation. They were too comfortable with each other. I stood there, hidden behind a pillar, watching them for what felt like an eternity. My stomach twisted. He was cheating on me. "Chike, are you going to introduce your wife?" A voice broke through my thoughts, and I turned to see his colleague, Grace. She was standing next to me, smiling at me as if nothing was wrong. But there I was, standing like a fool, trying to act like I wasn't on the verge of a breakdown. I swallowed hard. "Oh, Chike, right?" I looked back at him, and he turned around, his eyes widening in surprise. Before I knew what was happening, I heard Chike's voice, loud, angry, and bitter. "What are you doing here, Titi? I told you to stay home." The words hit me like a slap, and I was too stunned to respond. The room seemed to go quiet as everyone's eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of every gaze. Felt like my chest was closing in on me. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. "Why did you bring her here, Chike?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" But he only looked at me coldly. His eyes, usually full of affection, were now filled with disdain. "You know what, Titi?" He stepped closer to me, a cruel smirk forming on his lips. "I should have never married you. You've been a burden for too long." The room seemed to blur as I stood there, trying to make sense of what was happening. His words rang in my ears, each one a sharp dagger, but it wasn't until I saw the woman's smug smile that everything clicked. "Excuse me?" I could barely hold myself together. "You! Get out of here, Titi. You're embarrassing me," Chike interrupted. "You're not wanted here." It was a harsh slap, but worse than the slap was the realization that he had been planning this all along. This wasn't just a casual affair. He had been hiding it from me for months, maybe longer. With every ounce of strength left in me, I looked him in the eyes. "You've humiliated me, Chike, but what you don't know is that I'm not the fool you think I am." The tension in the room increased as everyone waited for what would happen next. But as I turned to leave, I heard Chike's voice again, his tone dripping with venom. "You're just going to walk away, huh? Well, I've had enough of you." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Instead, I walked out, the sound of his mocking laughter echoing in my ears. As the door slammed behind me, I took a deep breath. I wasn't just walking away. I was stepping into something far bigger than the affair. Something I wasn't ready for but couldn't avoid any longer. And what I didn't know yet was that my husband, Chike, had no idea who he was dealing with. Because I wasn't just any woman. I was the silent boss of the company. What would you do if your husband said this to you? Hit like if you've experienced betrayal, and comment below where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. I don't know how long I stood outside that hotel, just staring at the doors. My mind raced, trying to process everything that had just happened. Chike had embarrassed me in front of his colleagues, made me feel like a nobody, a mere shadow. But what hurt most wasn't what he said. It was how easily he had dismissed me, as if I was just an inconvenience in his life. I had always been the supportive wife, the one who held everything together, his career, the kids, the home. But apparently that wasn't enough. My stomach churned with a mix of anger and betrayal as I walked away from the hotel. I didn't go home. Not yet. I couldn't face him, not after the humiliation. So, I did what I always did when I needed clarity. I went to the one place where I could think without distractions. I headed to my office. Now, before you think I'm crazy, let me explain. I've been working at Chike's company for years, but not in the way you think. While he was out there making all the decisions, playing the role of the successful CEO, I was behind the scenes, handling the real business. The numbers, the contracts, the finances, everything that made the company run smoothly. No one knew it, not even Chike. I had always kept it quiet, never letting on that I was the real power behind the company. But tonight, that was going to change. As I walked into my office, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I turned on the lights, took a seat at my desk, and started typing. I had a plan. I wasn't going to sit back and let Chike's actions slide. No, I was going to take control, financial control, legal control, and above all, emotional control. I pulled up the company's financial reports on my computer. As I scanned through the numbers, I realized just how much I had been doing without Chike's knowledge. The investments I'd made, the strategic partnerships I'd forged, everything was in place. Everything was ready for me to take over, and now I had the perfect excuse. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Chike had no idea who I really was. He thought I was just his wife, the one who cooked his meals and took care of his kids. He didn't know that I had been managing the company's finances for years, working with the top advisors, and making decisions that had helped the business grow. But the best part? Chike had no idea. He thought he was the one pulling the strings, but it was me all along. And now I was going to make sure he knew that. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I reached out to my lawyer, sending a few texts with the most strategic legal moves I could think of. First, I would secure a few key accounts, his personal accounts, the company's accounts, before Chike even knew what was happening. Then, I would make the changes that would guarantee I'd have full control. But the biggest step? I was going to expose him for the fraud he was. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the last few years. Chike had lied to me, cheated on me, and made me feel small. But now I had the power to turn the tables. I had to admit it felt good. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just the supportive wife. I was the woman in charge. The next morning, I headed to the office early, just like I always did. Chike was already there, waiting for me, his usual confident smile on his face. He didn't know what was coming. "Morning, love," he said, brushing past me to get to his desk. "How's the Chike, I interrupted, my voice low but firm. I need to talk to you. He looked at me, his expression shifting slightly. What's going on, Titi? You look. I know about the woman, Chike, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the hurt I was feeling. I know what you've been doing behind my back. The room fell silent. He froze, his eyes widening in surprise. What are you talking about? I know everything, I said, walking over to the desk and placing the financial documents in front of him. You've been playing this game for too long, Chike, but I'm done being the fool. Now you'll learn what it really means to cross me. His face went pale as he glanced down at the papers in front of him. But instead of a confession, he tried to cover it up with his usual arrogance. TT, I don't know what you think. Don't play dumb, I snapped, cutting him off. I know what you've been doing, and I'm not leaving this office until you understand just how much power I hold in this company. You think you've been the boss? Well, I've been the silent one. And now, it's time for you to learn your place. Chike stood there, speechless. I could see the realization dawning on him, but it was too late for apologies. This was about more than just infidelity. This was about respect. You're going to regret this, TT, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Not as much as you will, I replied, my tone cold and unyielding. I wasn't going to make a scene, not yet. But I had a plan, and Chike was about to find out that when it came to betrayal, no one could play the game better than me. I could feel the tension in the air as I sat across from Chike. He was trying to regain his composure, but I could see the panic in his eyes. The facade of confidence he usually wore was gone, replaced by uncertainty. He wasn't used to me standing my ground. Hell, he wasn't used to me having ground to stand on. His words earlier still echoed in my ears. You're going to regret this, TT. But there was something about the way he said it that didn't sit right. I knew he wasn't just angry. He was scared. And that made me realize I had him exactly where I wanted him. I don't think you understand, Chike, I said, breaking the silence. My voice was calm, controlled, and I felt a strange sense of empowerment, as though the power was finally back in my hands. I understand perfectly, he said, his voice betraying a hint of desperation. What do you want, TT? Money? You've always had money. I laughed softly, shaking my head. It's never been about money, Chike. It's about respect. And I haven't had it from you for years. He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes narrowing. What's this really about, then? You're trying to take control of the company? You think you can just walk in and take everything I've built? I could see the fear now, the crack in his confident demeanor. And that only made me more determined. You've built nothing on your own, Chike. I built this company. I've been the one making the real decisions, handling the finances, securing the contracts. You've just been the face of it, pretending to be the boss. The look on his face was priceless. I could tell he was struggling to process the fact that everything he thought he knew was a lie. That woman in his office, the one he had been so cozy with, she didn't matter anymore. The company didn't matter. What mattered now was how much I could expose him, and how far I could take this power play. You're insane, he muttered under his breath, his hands gripping the edge of the table. You don't know what you're doing. I leaned in slightly, my gaze locking onto his. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm doing exactly what you've been doing to me all these years. Playing the game. But you know what? I'm better at it than you. I stood up and walked to my desk, where I had left all the files I needed. I opened one of the drawers and pulled out a folder, sliding it over to him. These are the accounts you've been hiding. These are the investments that you've mismanaged. And these are the documents proving that I'm the real CEO of this company. Chike reached for the folder hesitantly, flipping through the papers. His face was turning red as he scanned the documents, his fingers shaking. He was trying to figure out how much damage I had done. But I wasn't finished. I've made sure all the key accounts are secured. I've made sure the legal protections are in place. And you know what? You can't touch any of it, Chike. Not anymore. The silence in the room was deafening. He was speechless, his gaze still fixed on the papers in front of him. I could see the realization dawning on him. He had no power anymore. He wasn't in control. What are you going to do now, Chike? I asked, my voice steady and unwavering. Are you going to beg me to leave it all behind? Or are you going to try and fight me? Because either way, I've already won. He finally looked up at me, his face pale and defeated. You really think you've beaten me? That you've won? No, I replied, shaking my head. I know I've won. I don't need to think about it. I've already won. There was a long pause before he finally stood up from his chair. His eyes filled with a mix of anger and something else. Something I couldn't quite read. But in that moment, I realized just how much I had changed. The woman sitting across from him now was not the same woman he had belittled all those years. I wasn't the wife who had quietly supported him while he played his games. I was the woman who had taken control of her own destiny, and his downfall was just a part of the process. I won't let you get away with this, TT, Chike said, his voice low and threatening. You've already lost, Chike, I said firmly, standing my ground, and there's nothing you can do about it. The days that followed were a blur of activity, but underneath it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Chike, for all his bravado, was not taking my move lying down. I could see it in the way he avoided me in the office, in the way he refused to acknowledge the obvious power shift. But he wasn't going to roll over that easily. I knew he would fight back, and I was ready for it. Chike had always been a man who thought he could manipulate his way out of anything. And now it was time for me to show him how far that manipulation would take him. As I worked from my office, signing documents, securing the company's assets, and tightening up the financials, I could feel Chike's presence looming. But he wasn't just hanging around trying to fix things himself. No, he had a plan. I could see the subtle ways he tried to turn things in his favor. Talking to colleagues, making promises behind my back, all the while pretending that nothing had changed. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk reading through a proposal for an upcoming merger, my phone buzzed with a new message. I knew it was from him before I even checked. Meet me at the office tonight, it read. I'm giving you one last chance to end this without going further. You know I'm a reasonable man. A rush of anger surged through me, but I controlled it. I knew this was just another one of Chike's attempts to regain some control, to keep me in the dark about the power I held. But I also knew that if I let this opportunity slip, he would find another way to worm his way back in. I made the decision to go. I wasn't about to let him have the upper hand again. He needed to understand that I was not the woman he had once known, the woman who would swallow her pride and pretend everything was fine. I wasn't backing down now. By the time I arrived at the office that evening, the building was eerily quiet. Chike's car was the only one in the parking lot. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but I refused to hesitate. I walked in with purpose, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floors as I made my way to the boardroom where Chike had told me to meet him. When I opened the door, I saw him sitting at the head of the long conference table. His expression was calm, but there was a coldness to it. I could tell he was gearing up for another round of intimidation. TT, he said, his voice smooth but tense. I was hoping we could resolve this like adults. You know, there's no need for all this drama. I crossed my arms and stood at the door, refusing to walk any further into the room. Drama? You're the one who's been living a lie for months. Chike, you're the one who thought you could pull the wool over my eyes, destroy everything we built, and get away with it. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the polished wood of the table. I don't know what you think you're doing, TT. You're playing a dangerous game. This could all backfire on you. The company, the kids. I interrupted, stepping forward now, my eyes narrowing. Don't talk to me about the kids, Chike. You're the one who's been absent from their lives. You're the one who has been too busy with your affairs and your company to be there for them. And now, you think you can manipulate me into letting it all slide? No. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This doesn't have to go public, TT. You know that. I'll give you what you want. Money, assets, whatever it takes to make this go away. But I won't let you take everything from me. I stood my ground. You think money can fix this? You think you can just buy your way out of this mess? Not this time, Chaik. You've crossed a line. And now, I'm going to make sure you face the consequences. For a moment, he was silent, his eyes flicking from me to the papers spread out in front of him. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, and I knew he was trying to come up with some counterattack. But whatever he was planning, it was too late. He had already lost. You're making a mistake, TT, he said, his voice colder now, almost desperate. You think you can just take everything from me and walk away without consequences? I have connections. I know people who can turn this whole thing around. I smiled, sharp and full of finality. You think I'm scared of your connections? Chaik, I have the law on my side. I've already made sure the paperwork is in place. The contracts are sealed. The company's future is in my hands now. He looked at me, his jaw tightening. So, this is how it's going to be, huh? You're going to ruin me, take everything I've built and leave me with nothing. No, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. You ruined yourself. I'm simply making sure the truth comes out. I'm making sure that you face the consequences of your own actions. There was a long pause, and I could see the bitterness in his eyes as he realized just how powerless he was now. Chaik had always been the man who thought he could control everything and everyone. But tonight, I had stripped him of that illusion. You're out of your mind, he muttered, his voice low and defeated. I'm not out of my mind, Chaik, I replied, my voice steady and unyielding. I'm taking back everything you tried to steal from me, and this time it's going to be my terms. The next few days were a whirlwind. I was no longer just the wife who supported her husband's dreams. I was the woman leading a corporate takeover. The feeling was exhilarating, but the weight of the situation still settled heavily on my shoulders. I was about to expose everything, tear down the empire Chaik had spent years pretending to build. But even as I felt the rush of power, there was a gnawing fear at the back of my mind. What would happen to the kids? To the life I'd built? But every time that doubt crept in, I reminded myself why I was doing this. This wasn't just about Chaik's betrayal. It was about reclaiming the respect I had lost and taking back my dignity. I wasn't going to let this man continue to manipulate me or anyone else. The first step in my plan was to bring the truth to light. I wasn't going to let him continue running the company as though nothing had changed. I had to expose the lies, the deceit, and the betrayal for what they were. As I sat in my office, reviewing the documents I had gathered, my phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected source. Grace, one of Chaik's colleagues. She had always been friendly to me, but I never expected her to reach out now. Can we talk? I need to tell you something important about Chaik. The message read. I stared at the screen for a moment, hesitating. Grace, was she going to side with him? Or was she really trying to help? I had no choice but to find out. I called her back, and within minutes, we were on the phone. Her voice was shaky, and I could hear the fear in it. TT, I don't know how to say this, Grace began, but I think you need to know. Chaik. He's been hiding things from you, things about the company, about the investments, and even about his personal life. My heart skipped a beat. I had known about his affair, but was there more? Grace, I said, keeping my voice calm. I know about the affair. I know he's been cheating on me. But what else? What are you talking about? There was a long pause on the other end. Then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. He's been hiding funds, TT. Large sums of money that were supposed to go into the company. He's been funneling it into personal accounts, accounts you wouldn't even know about. And there's more. He's been manipulating investors, making deals behind your back, using the company's money for his own gain. The blood drained from my face. I had suspected something was off with the company's finances. But this was worse than I could have imagined. I can't just sit by and let him destroy everything, Grace continued. I've seen enough, TT. I've been with the company for years, and I can't ignore this any longer. You have to stop him before it's too late. I was silent for a moment, taking it all in. The anger surged within me, but so did a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the validation I needed. The truth was finally coming to light, and it wasn't just me who had been blind to what was happening. Thank you, Grace, I said, my voice steady now. You've just given me the ammunition I need to end this. I'm going to make sure Chike pays for what he's done. I just want you to be careful, TT, Grace said, her voice full of concern. He's dangerous when cornered. And now that he knows you've caught on, he won't go down without a fight. I know, I replied, my hand tightening around the phone. But I'm ready for it. I'm not going to let him destroy everything I've worked for. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my office, the weight of the information sinking in. Chike's betrayal was deeper than I had ever imagined. He had used his position, his charm, and his lies to manipulate not just me but the entire company. He had taken everything I had given him, my trust, my loyalty, and turned it against me. But now it was time to turn the tables. I knew what I had to do next. I reached out to my lawyer, scheduling an emergency meeting. The next step in my plan was to ensure that Chike's manipulation of the company's finances was fully exposed. I wasn't going to just take control, I was going to take him down. That evening, as I prepared for the meeting, a strange calmness settled over me. I had always been the one who was overlooked, the one who played the quiet, supportive role. But now I was taking the reins, and I wasn't going to let Chike or anyone else stop me. The meeting with my lawyer was quick but decisive. We discussed the legal steps I needed to take to secure my position within the company. I signed the necessary documents that would protect my interests and solidify my control. But what struck me the most was the moment when I realized that this wasn't just about power, it was about justice. Chike had tried to make me feel small, insignificant, as though I was just a piece of his life he could discard when it suited him. But I was about to prove to him that I wasn't going anywhere. As I left the meeting, I felt a renewed sense of strength. The next day, I was going to confront Chike head-on. I wasn't just going to expose him. I was going to take everything from him, piece by piece, until he understood that betrayal had consequences. I woke up early the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The meeting with my lawyer had been just the beginning. Today, I was going to take the next step. I wasn't just going to let Chike have his way anymore. It was time to make him face the consequences of his actions. The calm before the storm was finally over. I spent the early morning going over the final details of my plan. I had been meticulous about everything, getting all the legal protections in place, securing my position within the company, and preparing myself for whatever Chike might throw at me. I had taken the first steps, but I knew he would fight back. He would try to manipulate his way out of it. But this time I was ready. The kids were at school, and Chike had already left for work. I knew he would be expecting me to come to the office and have a civil conversation with him, like we had so many times before. But this time I wasn't going to play by his rules. Today he was going to see who had the power. I walked into the office with a sense of calm, my steps echoing through the empty halls. I wasn't here for small talk. I wasn't here to apologize for anything. I was here to finish what I started. I found Chike in his office, sitting at his desk, looking like the man who had everything under control. He looked up when I entered, his face briefly showing surprise. But then, as always, he tried to mask it with that arrogant smirk of his. "TT, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cold, though I could see the unease in his eyes. "We need to talk." Can we do this like adults? I didn't sit down. I stood in front of his desk, my posture straight and confident. No, Chike, we're not going to talk like adults. We're going to settle this once and for all. His eyebrows furrowed. What do you mean by that? I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder full of documents. Financial statements, emails, contracts, everything I had carefully gathered over the last few days. I dropped the folder on his desk, watching him flinch as the contents spilled out. You think you can just run this company and your life like a game, Chike? You think you can hide everything from me? Well, now the truth's out. I've been the one managing the finances all along, and I've seen everything. Your lies, your deceit, your manipulations. His expression faltered for a moment, but it quickly returned to its usual mask of control. You're making a mistake, TT, he said, though his voice lacked the usual conviction. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want things to go this far. I shook my head. No, Chike, you made this mistake the moment you thought I didn't know what was going on. The moment you betrayed me. And now, I'm going to make sure you face the consequences. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is insane. You can't do this. I'll fight you every step of the way. You're nothing without me. That last comment hit me like a punch to the gut. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I stood my ground, my gaze unwavering. You've always thought that, haven't you? That I'm nothing without you. But the truth is, I'm stronger than you ever gave me credit for. And now, I'm about to take everything from you. He let out a bitter laugh. You think you can just take control of everything? The company? The house? The kids? You think you're the one calling the shots now? You think the world will just hand it to you because you think you're in charge? The anger flared within me, but I controlled it. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about justice. You've been living a lie, Chike. A lie I'm going to expose for the world to see. You think I'm going to let you continue this charade? Not anymore. Chike's face darkened as he walked toward the door. You're making a huge mistake, TT. You have no idea who you're messing with. I watched as he opened the door, his back to me as he walked out into the hallway. But before he could take another step, I called out to him. You've been playing games with me for too long, Chike. It's time to face the music. He paused, his back still turned to me. I could see his shoulders tense, his fists clenched at his sides. This isn't over, TT. You'll regret this. I walked to the door and stood in the frame, my voice calm but filled with finality. No, Chike, it's over for you. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but I was done. Done being the woman in the background. Done being the wife who accepted his lies. This was my time now, and I was going to take everything I deserved, starting with Chike's empire. The hours following my confrontation with Chike were a blur. The adrenaline had left me feeling both exhausted and empowered. For the first time in years, I felt like I had taken control of my life. But as I sat in my office, reflecting on what had just transpired, I knew that Chike wouldn't let it go. He would retaliate. He would try to manipulate the situation, turn people against me, and destroy my position in the company. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my future, and I wasn't about to back down. The following morning, I arrived at the office early, before anyone else. The building was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that was about to unfold. I sat at my desk, organizing the legal documents that would secure my place. I was ready for whatever Chike would throw at me, but as I sat there, trying to steady my breath, I heard the sound of footsteps outside my door. I didn't need to look up to know it was him. He was already plotting his next move. Chike walked into my office, his expression colder than I had ever seen it. He didn't say a word as he shut the door behind him and locked it. You don't have to do this, TT, he said, his voice low but filled with frustration. You don't have to destroy everything. I've been more than patient with you. I kept my gaze steady, refusing to show any hint of weakness. You had your chance, Chike. You made your decisions, and now I'm making mine. He leaned against my desk, his hands clasped in front of him as if he was preparing for some kind of negotiation. I'm giving you one last chance to walk away from this. You can have whatever you want, money, assets, the house. Just leave the company to me. Leave me my reputation. I laughed bitterly. Reputation? You think you still have a reputation? After everything you've done? After everything you've hidden from me? It's too late for you, Chike. You don't get to keep the company, the money, or my respect. He stood up straight, his eyes narrowing with rage. You think you can just walk in here and take everything I've worked for? You're nothing, TT. Nothing without me. Those words hit me harder than I cared to admit, but I refused to let him see how much they stung. You may have thought you built this empire, but it was me, Chike. It was me who made sure it didn't fall apart. And now I'm taking control. I've already secured the company's assets. It's only a matter of time before I make sure everyone knows the truth about you. His eyes flashed with something dark. You're playing a dangerous game. I've already contacted my lawyers. You won't get away with this. I stood up from my desk, walking toward him slowly. I'm not afraid of your lawyers, Chike. I've already secured everything legally. You can try to fight back, but it's already over. The company is mine now. For a moment we just stood there, staring at each other, the tension between us so thick it felt suffocating. But then his demeanor shifted. He wasn't angry anymore, he was desperate. You really think you can just take everything? He asked again, but this time, there was a note of vulnerability in his voice. I've worked too hard for this. You can't just take it all away. I didn't flinch. You don't deserve it, Chike. Not after everything you've done. His expression hardened once more. Fine. You want to play dirty? We'll play dirty. With that, he turned on his heel and walked out of my office, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew he wasn't going to give up easily, but I had made my move. I was in control now, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Chike wasn't the type to back down quietly. He would fight back with everything he had. And as much as I had prepared for this moment, I wasn't sure I was ready for what was coming next. As I sat back down at my desk, I realized that I was no longer just fighting for the company. I was fighting for my future, for my children, for the life that I had built, no matter the cost. The battle had begun. The days that followed were filled with tension, as Chike tried everything he could to take back control. I had known it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for whatever he threw my way. In the back of my mind, I had a nagging feeling that he would resort to desperate measures. And I was right. Chike's lawyers had already started flooding my inbox with legal threats and cease and desist letters. But I wasn't worried. My legal team had everything prepared. The company's finances were locked down. The documents were in place, and all the necessary contracts had been signed. I wasn't just holding my ground. I was making sure there was no way for him to slip through the cracks. But then came the unexpected. One evening, as I was wrapping up work in my office, I received an email from the company's IT department. The subject line read, "Urgent. Suspicious activity in company servers." I clicked it open quickly, my heart racing. The email detailed how there had been an attempted breach of our internal server. The files containing sensitive financial data were targeted, and there had been attempts to alter the system's logs to cover up evidence of embezzlement. It was clear who was behind it. Chike was playing his last hand. He was trying to destroy everything I had worked for by erasing the evidence. He was using his last chance to fight back, to manipulate the situation, and make it look like I was the one in the wrong. I sat back in my chair, trying to remain calm. This was exactly what I had expected, but it wasn't going to be enough. Not this time. I immediately called my lawyer, arranging an emergency meeting to discuss the breach. I knew this wasn't just a corporate issue, it was now a criminal one. Chike had crossed a line. The next morning, I headed to the office early. The IT department had already begun securing the servers and gathering evidence, but I needed to do something more. I needed to make sure this was handled swiftly and that Chaik couldn't do anything else to ruin my future. I walked into the building, my steps confident but my mind racing. I could already sense the shift in the air. Everyone knew something was happening, but no one knew what. Chaik had lost his charm, his influence, and now he was desperate. I went straight to the legal department, where my lawyer was waiting for me. He was already on the phone with law enforcement. The situation was moving fast, and I knew we had to act quickly. "We've got everything in place," my lawyer said as he hung up the phone. "The authorities are ready to investigate, and we've already locked down the servers. This could be the end of Chaik's career." I nodded. "It's not just about the company anymore. It's about making sure he can't do this to anyone else." After a few more hours of organizing everything, we finally had a plan. My lawyer would handle the legal side, ensuring that Chaik's illegal actions were fully exposed. Meanwhile, I would continue to secure the company's assets, making sure that nothing would be left behind for him to take. But I had one more thing to do. I called a meeting with the board of directors that afternoon. It was time for them to know the full truth. I was no longer just the silent wife in the background. I was the leader, the one with the power, and I wasn't going to let Chaik's lies go unchallenged. As I stood in front of the board members, I could see their eyes flicking between me and the documents I had placed on the table. They had no idea what was coming, but I could feel the power shift as I spoke. "Chaik has been hiding the truth from all of you," I said, my voice steady. "He has been embezzling funds from this company, manipulating investors, and covering up his actions. But that ends today." I watched as the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them were visibly shocked, while others tried to mask their surprise. But I wasn't there to comfort them. I was there to take control. "I've secured the company's future," I continued. "I've already put in place the legal measures to protect the business and ensure that everything is in order. Chaik is no longer in charge. I am." I could see the realization hit them. They understood now. They knew that the woman standing in front of them was not the one they had underestimated for so long. One of the older board members, a man who had always been loyal to Chaik, cleared his throat. "TT, we can't just change everything overnight. This isn't." I cut him off. "It's already been changed. I'm the one calling the shots now, and if you want to keep your jobs, you'll respect that. I'm done being the invisible wife. I've spent years building this company in the shadows, and I'm done being ignored." The room fell silent, and for a moment I thought they might push back. But then, one by one, the board members nodded in agreement. They knew it was over. Chaik was finished. After the meeting, I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. I had done it. I had taken control, exposed the truth, and finally stood up for myself and my children. But I wasn't done yet. Chaik was out there, desperate, and I knew he would try one last time to take everything from me. But I was ready. This time he wouldn't win. He couldn't. Chaik was done playing games. I could feel it in the air. The tension that had been building for weeks was reaching its breaking point. His once confident demeanor had shifted to one of frantic desperation. He had already tried to manipulate the board, plant false rumors, and sabotage my efforts, but each move had failed. I could see it in his eyes when we passed each other in the hallway, the quiet realization that everything he had worked for was slipping through his fingers. But he wasn't about to go down without a fight. No, Chaik was a man who fought to the very end. And I knew it, he would try something big, something to throw me off balance, something to take back what I had taken from him. That afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing some documents, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. My gut told me this was it. I picked up the phone, holding my breath for a moment before answering. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice calm. "TT," came Chaik's voice, but this time it was different. There was no arrogance, no bravado, only cold, calculated fury. You think you've won, don't you? I let out a slow breath, steeling myself for whatever he was about to say. Chike, we're past the point of talking. You're done. Oh, am I? His voice dropped even lower, more sinister. You really think this is over? You really think you've taken everything from me? I could hear the subtle shift in his tone, the threat hanging in the air, unspoken but clear. I wasn't stupid. I knew what he was capable of, but I wasn't going to be intimidated. Not now, not ever. I've already secured my position, I replied, my voice unwavering. There's nothing you can do now. You think so? He said, his words dripping with venom. You've sealed your own fate. You've made a huge mistake, Titi. You'll regret this. You don't even know what I've been planning. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to remain calm. You've been planning something? What are you talking about, Chike? There was a pause, and then he spoke again, the words slow and deliberate. I've got everything on you, Titi. Everything. I know about the company's finances, the illegal investments you've made, the shady deals you've hidden. You think I'm going down alone? No, I'm taking you with me. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. My stomach turned as his words sank in. I wasn't just fighting for control of the company anymore. I was fighting for my reputation, for my future. And Chike was playing dirty. I hung up the phone without responding, my mind racing. Was it true? Had he really found something that could destroy me? I couldn't afford to panic. I had to be calm, calculated. I had already built a legal wall around myself, but I couldn't ignore the fact that Chike had his own tricks up his sleeve. I called my lawyer immediately, my hands trembling slightly as I explained the conversation. What do we do now? Is there anything he could have that could turn this around? My lawyer's voice was reassuring, but it didn't mask the seriousness of the situation. If he's bluffing, it's nothing we can't handle. But if he's serious, we need to act fast. I suggest we get ahead of it, gather more evidence, and prepare for the worst. If he's got anything on you, we need to know. I nodded, even though I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I'm ready. Let's do it. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and frantic organizing. I couldn't afford to take any chances. If Chike had found something, anything, I needed to make sure it couldn't be used against me. I wasn't going to let him drag me down with him. By the time I left the office that night, the sense of urgency was overwhelming. I knew Chike wouldn't stop. He would do anything to regain control, to make sure I didn't walk away with everything. I drove home in silence, my mind running through all the possible scenarios. What if he wasn't bluffing? What if he had truly uncovered something that could bring everything crashing down? I walked into the house, greeted by the sound of the kids playing in the living room. The sight of their innocent faces made everything feel even more urgent. I couldn't let Chike's actions destroy our family, our future. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something. The game had shifted. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It wasn't just about Chike's betrayal or his attempt to manipulate me. This was about taking control of my life. This was about standing up for myself, for my kids, for the life we deserved. I had to win, and I wasn't going to stop until I did. The days after my conversation with Chike had been filled with a mounting sense of tension. I had prepared for every eventuality, but nothing could fully prepare me for what was coming. Chike was running out of options. The walls were closing in on him, and I knew that now, more than ever, he would try his final desperate attempt to take me down. But I wasn't afraid. I had already won. It was just a matter of time before Chike realized it too. The phone call I received late that evening was one I had been expecting but still dreaded. It was from my lawyer, his voice grim as he spoke. "TT, we've been tracking Chike's movements. He's gone ahead with his threats. He's trying to leak false financial information about you and the company to the press. He's making sure this gets as public as possible." My heart skipped a beat. What exactly has he done? I asked, my voice tight. He set up a meeting with several journalists. They're expecting a story about corporate fraud involving you, and he's using the information he's gathered to make it look like you're the one who's been embezzling from the company. We need to act fast, TT. If this gets out, it could ruin your reputation. I stood still for a moment, absorbing the information. It was Chaik's final play. Desperate, reckless, and dangerous. He was trying to destroy me publicly, to take away the control I had worked so hard for. But I knew something he didn't. I had already anticipated this move. I'll handle it, I said, my voice steady and cold. Tell the press to expect a statement from me. I'm going to take control of this before it even begins. As I hung up, I felt a surge of determination. This was it, the final battle. Chaik was about to make his biggest mistake. He thought he could destroy me. He thought he could tear down everything I had worked for. But in reality, he was just digging his own grave. The next morning, I prepared a public statement. It was time to expose everything. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative any longer. I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't afraid to show the world who Chaik really was. By the time the press conference started, I had gathered all the evidence I needed. My legal team and PR team were ready to support me, ensuring that everything I said would be backed up with irrefutable proof. The press were eager, their questions sharp as they waited for my response to the growing scandal. Chaik was nowhere to be found. I knew he was watching from the sidelines, waiting to see if his smear campaign would succeed. But it couldn't. As I stood at the podium, I felt the weight of the moment. This was my time to reclaim my dignity. I wasn't just here to defend myself. I was here to take back everything he had tried to steal from me. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady but firm. I've called you here today to set the record straight. What you've heard over the past few days is not the truth. This is not a story of corporate fraud. It's a story of betrayal. A story of a man who thought he could manipulate his way to the top, using lies and deceit to control not just a company, but his family. The cameras flashed as I continued, laying out the facts one by one. I detailed the financial mismanagement, the illegal investments, the attempts to cover up Chaik's wrongdoing. And I didn't stop there. I exposed his affair, his emotional manipulation, and the lies he had fed me for years. The truth is, I said, my eyes scanning the room, Chaik thought he could control me. He thought he could use me to build his empire, all while betraying my trust and destroying everything we had built together. But I'm here today to tell you that I will not be his victim. I will not allow him to destroy me. I have worked too hard for everything I have. I have fought too long to be the woman I am today. There was a long silence as the press absorbed everything I had said. I could see the shift in the room, the doubt, the disbelief fading as they began to understand the truth. Chaik had nothing left. His lies had been exposed, his manipulations revealed. He was no longer the man in control. After the press conference, I returned to my office, knowing that the tide had turned. Chaik would try to fight back, but he couldn't win. The evidence was clear, and the public now knew the truth. That evening, I received another call from my lawyer. TT, it's over. The press is running your story. The public has turned against Chaik, and the board has officially voted to remove him from the company. We've also filed a civil suit against him for embezzlement. I leaned back in my chair, a sense of peace settling over me. It was finally over. Chaik had lost. Not just the company, but everything he had built on lies. And I had won, not through revenge, but through the truth. The next few months were filled with legal battles, but they were all battles I had already won. Chaik's reputation was shattered, his career destroyed, but I was free. As for me, I took the reins of the company, steering it toward a brighter future, one built on honesty and integrity. And as I looked at my children, I knew I had done the right thing. I had fought not just for myself, but for them too. I had reclaimed my power, and with it, I had secured my place at the head of the table. The days following Chike's downfall felt surreal. I had won, yes, but the victory wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. Chike's betrayal, his lies, and the emotional toll they had taken on me were not things that could be erased with a court decision or public exposure. But despite the weight of it all, there was a sense of relief. Finally, I was free. The company was now mine and the truth was out. The board had voted in my favor, and my legal team had secured my place as the rightful leader. But as I walked through the office, taking in the silence that now filled the halls, I realized that the real battle wasn't just in the courts or the press. It was in how I would rebuild what Chike had nearly destroyed. I wasn't just here to manage a company. I was here to create something better. Something built on the lessons I had learned, the strength I had gained, and the resilience that had gotten me through the darkest of times. It wasn't easy. I spent long hours in meetings, making decisions that would shape the future of the company. I worked closely with my legal and financial teams to ensure that everything was secured and that we could move forward without the remnants of Chike's manipulations. But I also knew that the real challenge lay in restoring the company's reputation. Chike's actions had caused damage, both financially and emotionally, and I had to make sure that the public, the clients, and even the employees understood that a new era had begun. I started by personally meeting with key investors and clients, assuring them that the company would be operating under new leadership, with a focus on integrity and growth. I had no interest in revenge. I wanted to rebuild. I wanted to show everyone that we could rise from the ashes of the past and create something meaningful. Months passed, and the company began to recover. It wasn't an overnight fix, but each day brought us closer to where we needed to be. The employees who had once been fearful of Chike's temper now felt safe, empowered, and motivated to work hard for the future. And through all of this, I found myself growing stronger, more confident in my role. I wasn't just the woman who had been betrayed. I was the woman who had taken control and built something that would last. One day, as I sat in my office, looking over the company's latest projections, I was interrupted by a knock on the door. I looked up to see Grace, the same colleague who had helped expose Chike's actions. "I just wanted to check in on you," Grace said, smiling warmly. "How are you holding up?" I smiled back, feeling a sense of gratitude toward her. "Better than I ever have," I replied. "It's been a lot, but I'm starting to feel like I've finally found my footing." She nodded, sitting down across from me. "I'm really proud of you, Titi. You did something that most people would have never had the courage to do. You took back your life, your company, and you did it all on your own." I looked out the window for a moment, reflecting on the journey. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said softly. "You were the one who gave me the courage to go through with it. I've spent so many years being the quiet one, the one who was always in the background. But now I see what I'm capable of. And I'm not going to stop." Grace smiled, clearly pleased. "You're a force to be reckoned with, Titi. I've always known that. The world is going to see that too." As I looked at her, I realized just how much I had changed. Chike had taken so much from me. My trust, my dignity, my belief in myself, but I had reclaimed it all. Not just for myself, but for the future I wanted to build. That evening, as I left the office and walked through the busy streets of the city, I felt a sense of pride that I hadn't known in years. The hustle and bustle of the urban life around me was a reminder that the world kept moving. And so would I. I had won the battle, but the journey was far from over. I was rebuilding not just a company, but a life. A life that was mine to shape, to lead, and to control. And I would never again let anyone take that away from me. The future was bright. It was mine. It had been nearly a year since Chike's downfall, and I stood on the balcony of my office, looking out over the city. The skyline, which once seemed like a distant dream, now felt like a symbol of everything I had worked for. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the city, and I felt the weight of the journey I had been on. A year ago, I had been a woman betrayed, shattered by the man I had trusted with my life. I had been the silent partner in a marriage built on lies, a wife who had stood by while her husband played his game. But today I was not that woman. Today, I was the woman who had taken back her life, her company, and her dignity. I smiled to myself as I reflected on the lessons I had learned. It wasn't just about revenge or proving a point. It was about rediscovering who I was, about realizing that I was strong enough to fight for what was mine, to rise above the betrayal, and to create something even better. The company had recovered, far surpassing expectations. Investors were confident in our direction, and employees were more motivated than ever, knowing that the leadership now came from a place of integrity and transparency. We were no longer just a company, we were a force to be reckoned with. I had made difficult decisions along the way, but every one of them had been worth it. The employees who had once been afraid of Chike's wrath now saw me as a leader, someone who valued their work, who listened to their concerns, and who built a culture based on respect. The clients who had hesitated when Chike's scandals broke out were now our strongest advocates, praising our commitment to ethical business practices. But it wasn't just the company that had changed. It was me. I had learned to trust my instincts, to stand my ground, and to never let anyone diminish my worth. I had stopped being the woman in the background and became the woman in charge. Every decision I made, every step I took, was a reminder that I was in control of my destiny. I turned away from the balcony and walked back to my desk, where the familiar hum of the office surrounded me. It was a comforting sound, one that had become a symbol of how far I had come. My phone buzzed on the desk, and I picked it up to see a message from Grace. "Can we talk? I've got some big news." I smiled, knowing that Grace had been there for me every step of the way. She had been my ally, my sounding board, and now, it seemed, she had something important to share. I sent her a quick reply, inviting her to come up to my office. As I waited for her to arrive, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the people who had supported me, but for the person I had become. When Grace arrived, she wasted no time getting to the point. "TT, I've been offered a position in a new tech startup. It's a huge opportunity, and I wanted to share it with you before I made my decision. You've been such an inspiration to me, and I wanted to thank you for everything." I stood up and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Grace, I'm so proud of you. You've worked hard and you've earned this. Go and take the world by storm. I know you'll do amazing things." She smiled, her eyes shining with excitement. "I wouldn't be here without you, TT. You gave me the strength to pursue this. I'll never forget that." I watched her leave the office, knowing that this was just another step in her journey. But it was also a reminder that we were all capable of so much more than we realized. Sometimes it just takes one person, one moment of courage to change everything. I sat back down at my desk, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. I had built something strong, something lasting. But more importantly, I had found my own strength. As I looked out the window once again, the city seemed to stretch out before me, full of endless possibilities. There would be challenges ahead, of course. Life was never without its struggles. But I had learned to face them head-on, to stand tall, and to always keep moving forward. And as I moved into the next chapter of my life, I knew one thing for sure. I would never be anyone's shadow again. I was the woman in charge, and nothing could take that away from me. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family,